The garage door was halfway open, just enough to let the summer air roll through and keep the place from feeling stuffy. A string of warm LED lights hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over folding tables, coolers, and a beat-up speaker humming low music. It wasn't a wild party. No flashing lights, no shaking walls. Just a handful of friends unwinding after a long week. Laughter echoed off the concrete floor, mixing with the smell of grilled burgers drifting in from the driveway. I leaned against the workbench, plastic cup in hand, watching everyone relax. Someone was telling a story about a traffic stop gone wrong, and a few people laughed a little too loud. I remember thinking how rare it was to get everyone together like this. Life had been busy, stressful. Nights like this mattered. That's when I noticed her. She stood across the street under the streetlight, arms crossed so tightly they looked locked in place, perfectly styled hair, crisp athletic jacket. Phone already in her hand. She wasn't just looking, she was staring. The kind of stare that made conversations trail off and shoulders stiffen. "Is that who I think it is?" one of my friends muttered. I sighed. Yeah, HOA Keran. Her real name wasn't Karen, but no one ever used it. She was the unofficial enforcer of the Homeowners Association, the type who measured grass height with a ruler and once fined a neighbor for leaving trash bins out 30 minutes too long. She'd complained about kids chalking the sidewalk, about wind chimes, about birds. The music wasn't loud. It was barely audible from the curb, but that didn't matter. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A neighborhood alert popped up. "Noise disturbance reported on Cedar Lane." Someone chuckled. "No way." Another friend glanced at the garage entrance. "Did she seriously call that in?" Before I could answer, red and blue lights washed over the driveway. The laughter died instantly. A patrol car rolled to a stop in front of my house, followed by another. Doors opened, boots hit pavement. The garage went silent except for the faint hiss of the grill. I raised my hand slightly, more out of habit than fear. "Well," I said quietly, "guess she really did it." Across the street, HOA Karen stood taller now, chin lifted, phone still pressed to her ear. You could almost feel her satisfaction from where we stood. This was her moment. She'd finally caught someone in the act. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known, was who she'd just called the police on. Not yet. The officers approached calmly, hands resting near their belts, eyes scanning the garage and the driveway. The lead officer was tall, broad-shouldered, with a neutral expression that suggested he'd handled 1,000 calls just like this. Behind him, 2 more followed, one already glancing toward the street where HOA Karen hovered like a self-appointed witness. "Evening," the lead officer said. "We got a noise complaint." I nodded. "Of course. Sorry if we bothered anyone." Before he could respond, something shifted in the air. One of my friends, Mike, set his cup down and squinted at the officer's badge. His eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "No way," Mike said under his breath. Another friend, Jen, leaned closer to me. "That's Officer Ramirez, right?" I watched recognition spread across the group like a quiet ripple. Subtle nods, suppressed smiles, straightened posture. The officers hadn't noticed yet, but the mood had changed completely. Officer Ramirez stepped closer, eyes moving over the speaker, the grill, the folding tables. "How many people here tonight?" "About 10, I replied. At that moment, Dave, who'd been leaning casually against my car, cleared his throat. "Ramirez? Luis Ramirez?" The officer paused, then looked directly at Dave. His serious expression cracked. "Dave?" They stared at each other for a beat before both laughed. "Well, I'll be damned," Ramirez said. "Didn't expect to see you here." Across the driveway, HOA Karen's smile faltered. Dave extended a hand. "Didn't expect you either. Thought you were on day shift now." "Usually am," Ramirez said, shaking his hand. "Covering for someone tonight." Another officer glanced around, suddenly more alert. "Wait, is that Jen Carter?" Jen raised her cup slightly. "Guilty." The second officer's eyes widened. "Traffic division, you trained my class." Now the third officer was looking uneasy, scanning faces more carefully. "Hold on," he said slowly. Are you guys? Mike grinned. Off duty? Yeah, most of us. The realization landed hard. Officer Ramirez exhaled and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You're telling me this noise complaint is against a garage full of cops? Detectives patrol traffic, Dave added. Couple retirees, too. Silence followed, then quiet laughter. From across the street, HOA Keran stepped forward, clearly confused. Excuse me, she called out sharply. Are you going to shut this down or not? Officer Ramirez turned toward her, expression composed but cool. Ma'am, we're handling it. Well, it's clearly too loud, she insisted, and I've reported this house before. Ramirez glanced back at the speaker, then at me. Music volume's within limits, he said. No violation. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. But I called 911, and we responded, he said evenly. The third officer coughed, hiding a smile. HOA Keran's face flushed as the weight of the situation began to sink in. The authority she'd expected to wield wasn't lining up the way she'd imagined. And this was only the beginning. HOA Keran wasn't used to being dismissed. You could see it in the way she straightened her back and stepped closer to the curb, as if proximity alone might restore control. Her voice sharpened, cutting through the quiet like a gavel strike. This neighborhood has rules, she said firmly. Garage parties are not permitted after 8 p.m. The HOA bylaws are very clear. Officer Ramirez remained calm. Ma'am, HOA rules aren't criminal law. We're here for a noise complaint, that's it. But I called the police, she snapped, waving her phone slightly. I expect enforcement. One of the off-duty officers, Tom, a retired sergeant, let out a low chuckle before catching himself. He took a sip from his cup and leaned closer to me. This is better than cable. Ramirez glanced back toward the garage again, double-checking the scene. No shouting, no blasting music, just conversation and low background sound. He turned back to Keran. Everything here is compliant, he said. No citation will be issued. Her face tightened. So you're just taking their side? Ramirez didn't hesitate. I'm taking the side of the law. That landed hard. She crossed her arms again, but this time it felt defensive rather than powerful. Then I want this documented. I want their names. The third officer, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. Ma'am, you don't get to demand personal information without cause. I'm the HOA vice president, she said like it was a badge. Tom finally spoke up. And I was a sergeant for 25 years. Titles don't mean much out here. Keran's eyes darted to him, then back to Ramirez. For the first time, uncertainty crept in. She tried again. They're drinking in public. Ramirez gestured to the garage. Private property. They're disturbing the peace. Multiple officers present disagree, he replied. Each attempt unraveled faster than the last. Neighbors had begun peeking through windows now, curiosity drawn by the patrol cars. A couple even stepped onto their porches. Keran noticed. Her voice dropped, but the edge remained. So you're telling me I wasted emergency services? Ramirez chose his words carefully. I'm saying this call wasn't necessary. That was the final blow. Keran stiffened, cheeks burning. She glanced around, realizing the audience had shifted, and not in her favor. The authority she relied on so heavily had evaporated, replaced by something far worse. Quiet judgment. Ramirez softened his tone slightly. If there's another issue, contact the HOA directly. Otherwise, have a good night. He nodded to us, then to his fellow officers. Enjoy your evening, folks. As they walked back to their cars, one of them muttered, Best noise complaint of the week. The patrol cars pulled away, lights off. Across the street, HOA. Keran stood frozen, phone still in hand, staring at a driveway full of calm, smiling faces, none of which she could control. And for the first time, she had nothing left to say. The street settled into an almost ceremonial silence once the patrol cars disappeared around the corner. The garage lights hummed softly again, and someone restarted the music, lower than before. Not out of fear, but out of courtesy. A few people exhaled at the same time, like the tension had finally been released from a shared breath. Across the street, HOA Karen lingered for a moment longer. Her posture had changed completely. No crossed arms, no phone held high, just a rigid stillness, as if she were recalculating everything she thought she understood about authority. Then, without another word, she turned and walked back to her house, porch light snapping off behind her. Dave raised his cup. "Well," he said, "that's a first. Never had backup show up before the briefing." Laughter rolled through the garage, easy, relieved, earned. Jen shook her head, smiling. She really thought this was going to go her way. "Most people like that do," Tom replied. "They confuse rules with power." The grill hissed as someone flipped burgers, the smell filling the air again. Conversations restarted, drifting naturally into old stories, academy days, close calls, ridiculous complaints that never should have been calls in the first place. The mood was lighter now, bonded by something unspoken, a shared respect for knowing when authority matters and when it doesn't. Later that week, the HOA newsletter landed in everyone's mailbox. There was a new paragraph under community reminders. Residents are encouraged to resolve minor disturbances through direct communication when appropriate. No names, no addresses, just a quiet adjustment. Karen didn't look at me the next time we passed each other on the sidewalk. The clipboard was gone. So was the stare. She nodded once, tight, controlled, and kept walking. The garage parties didn't stop after that. If anything, they became a little more frequent. Still respectful, still within the rules. But now, they carried a subtle confidence, like a line had finally been drawn and understood. What stayed with me most wasn't the irony or the humor of the night. It was the reminder that power doesn't come from calling it in. It comes from knowing when not to. And sometimes, the loudest lesson is taught in the calmest way possible, right after the sirens fade. Enjoying this real-life HOA story? If you like grounded stories where everyday moments take unexpected turns, consider subscribing for more echo stories just like this one. Give the video a like if the ending surprised you and drop a comment below. Have you ever dealt with an HOA situation that went completely sideways?